Hello everyone. How we all doing today? It's glad to um see you once again on this particular session. I also want to believe that um you have been following our previous series, right? But just to start this session, I think it would be best to introduce myself again. My name is none other than Promise Uche Onwachku, and I am the one of the leaders for the Azure Nigeria community, and also I am an MVP, a Microsoft Valuable Professional under the category of Microsoft Foundry and Azure, right? And today I intend to talk to you about some really, really awesome topics. So please ensure you stay tuned and of course follow our upcoming updates on the various sessions that will be coming up after this. Um in case you haven't joined or followed our social media pages, I would encourage you to do so. Of course, you can register for our upcoming sessions on the meetup group, and then also you can follow our LinkedIn pages and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And sure, you can be up to date with all the events and programs we have in store for you. All right, today I'll be talking about an interesting topic, and yeah, I'd like for you to just stay tuned and we'll move forward from there. Let me go ahead to share my screen. Yes, so like I mentioned earlier, we are looking at an interesting topic for today, which is generally enhancing enterprise decision making with the agentic retrieval engine. Agentic retrieval engine. Wow. I don't know, but to me, this is an really, really amazing topic. I call it an amazing topic because we are in an area or an arena where agentic um, objects, agentic, the use of agents now are becoming, very, very important and widespread. And for you to be able to understand how this work, it's always very, very important to ensure that you understand how agentic retrieval engines work. Now, in this particular session, I would be not just explaining, but I would also be giving a demo on how agentic retrieval engines work. With this, I would be demoing um, a sample application, making use of OpenAI, um, Microsoft Foundry, document search, and a web app. The application is hosted on a web app. But of course, before I go into the demo, I like to explain to you what it's like or what it is to actually enhance enterprise decision making with agentic retrieval engine. All right. First things first, right? We need to understand the problem for us to be able to provide a solution, right? Once you understand the problem, you can then be able to provide an adequate solution or a solution that works best, right? So, yes, the problem why Azure powered agentic retrieval matters. Why does it really matter, right? And one of the reasons, or some of the reasons I can tell you that it matters is because one, you're looking at what fragmented data estates. This is a particular problem that you want to be able to deal with, right? Enterprises span on-prem, multi-cloud, and SaaS, creating disconnected silos that impede timely decisions, right? So imagine that, I would say, as an administrator, or as a what was the word I would use? Someone who manages a system for an organization, but then you find out that due to the areas, or the way the organization is built, data is spread across multiple places, right? And top management need to make decision, right? But then they're like, oh, all of the I don't have a visibility to all of the materials pertaining to this topic. How then do I proceed to, make this decision as I should? Right? So that is one problem that needs to be solved. Another problem we're looking at is what shadow search and BI, right? So this one basically relates more on, I would say, when you're looking at traditional tools that lack semantic understanding and contextual reasoning, right? So what do I mean by this? When you make a search on a topic, right, you are not just looking at the where the information is stored, right? You need an let's say you need I would say something that not just reads the name of the document, but understands the context of the document, right? So you need something that understands the content in the document and can translate it to a viable answer based on the question you are asking, right? So that is one problem that needs to be solved. And the other one is Azure as a foundation, right? Of course, we all know that Azure is built in such a way to enable, what would I call it, platform scaling, right? I would call it a built-in, it has a built-in orchestration platform and governance, yeah, that allows for scalability, right? Now, agentic retrieval matters because it's able to solve problems of where you have data fragmented everywhere, and not just the fact that the data are fragmented everywhere, but then it can also understand the content of the document and give you answers based on reasoning on what is the best way the content of the document should fit into the answer you are asking. So, meaning that it's not just going and packing the content of the document, but it refines the data in such a way that it makes sense to the prompt you are passing to it, or the question you are asking to it. And that's why agentic retrieval systems or engines really, really matter a lot. Now, let's move forward. Now, what is an agentic retrieval engine, right? Agentic retrieval engine are generally retrieval augmented intelligence layer built on what Azure AI and Foundry orchestration, right? And basically, for this, we Microsoft Foundry or Azure generally has um, a new feature called the Foundry IQ that actually makes use of agents to be able to retrieve data from wherever they've been stored. Let's say your in your storage account, or possibly anywhere you've stored them, right? These agents are able to absorb the content of your files, right? And when you ask a prompt, they don't just spit back what is there in the file. They reason and are able to provide an answer that makes sense to you based on the content on those documents, right? So, in order to be able to understand how these agentic retrieval engines work, well, you need to understand how they interpret the intent, right? How they plan and retrieve, how they also reason and synthesize information, and of course, how they deliver answers, right? So in this case, in the first part, which is generally interpreting in intent, right? So agent pass user goals and content, not just keywords. So when you make a prompt, right, to an agent retrieval system, right, it takes in your prompt. It doesn't just look at your prompt. It tries to understand what is the context, what are you actually trying to ask, right? And then it does what we call a plan and retrieval process. In this case, um, your let's say for instance, your data has been chunked in Azure AI Search, right? And then it has been connected to, let's say for instance, OpenAI, which is acting as agent, right? So it then goes into Azure AI Search with the connectors, connected to it and agents from OpenAI, and tries to pull the precise relevant knowledge. So remember that the agent itself has absorbed the content of, you know, it has absorbed the content of your the information which you have on your file. So it's able to then take that consent and, retrieve the specific context from that content and give you as a form of reply. Right. Another thing again you should also look at is that the agent itself, before it passes the information back to you, it tries to reason, what are you trying to achieve from this content, right? So that's where the reason and the synthesis comes into play. So here you can see it says Azure OpenAI transforms raw data into what? Actionable insights. So it looks at the data it has, which it has gotten the content from, let's say, files you stored in your storage account. It tries to understand that data, and then looking at the reason plus the prompt you're asking, it's able to transform that data into something you yourself are able to understand. And of course, lastly, in the process, it produces synthesized responses, not just raw documents to you. So you may be wondering, when I say synthesized responses, so imagine that, let's say, in a document, you have something around saying, okay, Ade is a boy, right? And then probably you provide some context into what Ade was doing and where he was, in that document. Now, when you ask a question, right, your agent don't just go and say, okay, you let's say you ask a question about who is Ade, and then because on the file Ade is written Ade is a boy, then your agent should just pick up Ade is a boy and reply to you. No, your agent doesn't just do that. Your agent tries to understand the question you're asking. In this case, you said, who is Ade, right? It tries to understand that question and then gives you an answer that makes sense to you. So it goes to the document, sees what is written in the document, and provides an answer that you yourself you can understand. So it looks at the context or the content of the document and provides a reasonable answer to you. Now let's move forward to the next slide, right? Now, core Azure services powering agentic retrieval engine. Now, for you to understand how agentic retrieval engines work, you need to understand the services and how are these services helping the process of agentic retrieval engines, right? Now, one thing you need to know is that one, AI and cognitive services, in this case, Azure Open AI services, help the reasoning of your agents, right? Azure AI search, for instance, right, helps with vector retrieval, and Azure AI document helps with the intelligence for extraction, right? Now you also have data and integration, right? Azure Data Lake, for instance, helps with storage. Azure Synapse Fabric for analytics and API management, and logic apps for what? Orchestration. Also, governance and security, right? You have the Microsoft Entra ID for identity, Azure Monitor for observability, and Microsoft Purview for what? Compliance. So these services all have a way or a part they play in ensuring that you are able to make use of agentic retrieval engines in a I would call them in a very secure way, right? So you can see here I mentioned open AI reasoning, AI search, vector retrieval, document intelligence extraction. All of these are services being provided by AI and cognitive under the AI and cognitive section, right? And then you have the data and integration, and then the governance and security. Because in as much as you're doing all of this, you want to also ensure that, what's the word? You want to also ensure that people are able to, I would say, people are able to see what is currently going on, right? So that is one thing you need to really understand. um I am just checking here in a bit to ensure that this demo is actually going live. So I want to believe that you all can hear me. I want to believe so. If you are able to hear me and you are able to see these demos, I mean, maybe you can put maybe something like yes, maybe something like a screenshot or something, or just say you are able to hear me. So I know that this is being streamed as it is. Okay, I believe it is anyway. So let's proceed. All right. Now, on to the next topic we are looking at, or let me say, on to the next section of this topic. Key capabilities of the agentic retrieval engine. Now, I would say key capabilities of this engine generally revolves around the intent aware retrieval, right? Agents dynamically choose retrieval strategies based on what user goals. So, based on what it understands from the prompt you pass in, it then knows what exactly it should retrieve from your documents, right? Also, you also have to consider multi-agent collaboration. So you can have a system where specialized agents, let's say risk, finance, compliance, coordinate via what? Foundry workflows. So in this case, you can have multi-agents collaborating to ensure that the data that is being retrieved is corresponding to the context of what you are asking. Another thing to look at is what we call adaptive reasoning. Open AI models refine retrieval based on context and historical patterns. right? So this also comes into the part where I mentioned earlier, and I said that look, um, the agents don't just retrieve your data, right? They don't just retrieve your data, but they actually do help in understanding what are you asking from this data, right? They also want to understand what you are asking from this data and how they can give you an answer that makes sense from the data um, they have gathered or retrieved. So we've talked about intent aware retrieval, multi-agent collaboration, adaptive reasoning, right? Because they are adaptive in that way to reason on what exactly are you asking before they give you an output. And then the next one is what enterprise data fusion, which bridges structured SQL synapse with unstructured SharePoint, emails, and docs, right? So in an enterprise system where you also want to be able to retrieve data from, for instance, emails and SharePoint, and then also from structured things like, say, for instance, SQL, right? It helps with that collaboration, right? So you can be able to have multi-agent systems talking to one another in the process of agentic retrieval. And then the next one is what? Explainability and traceability, right? So while all of these agents are doing their work, you want to actually be able to see what is going on. How are they making these calls? How many amount of tokens are they using for these calls? Right. So that's where you have the purview or the Foundry logs deliver transparent, auditable reasoning paths, right? This is where you see what is actually happening while the agents are making these calls. All right, we move on to the next slide. Enterprise decision making scenarios. What scenarios do we see these agentic retrieval engines come into play, and how are they helping enterprise systems, right? How are they helping enterprise systems in making accurate decisions? Now, for decision scenarios for enterprise is one, strategic and executive systems, right? Enterprise systems where you have to make market intelligence aggression, multi-source competitor analysis, agent driven scenario modeling, right? So you know, in the process of launching a product, right, you want to be able to check that you have the necessary tools to be able to ensure you can both monitor and give accurate answers or questions to what your customers are asking about what product you're launching and all of that. So you need this tool to help in that process. Now, in operational systems where you have things like supply chain services in the mix, right? You want also agentic retrieval systems to be able to give you real-time answers on what's happening. And that's why you see under operational here, we have supply chain disruption analysis, real-time incident triage via Azure Monitor, HR plus ops workforce planning, right? In these kind of systems, you need something that can give you answer to real-time scenarios happening in your environment. Now, also in terms of environments that are customer facing, right? You need AI search embedding recommendations, sentiment analysis from CRM or comms, right? So if you're in environments where or use cases where you are customer facing, you want to be able to ensure that your AI agents or your agentic retrieval engines are giving you data that will also help your customers. And that's why you see here we have the AI search embedding recommendations. And of course, lastly, risk and compliance. If you are going to be having an agentic retrieval engine in place, you also want to ensure that you have they understand what policies are in place, regulatory systems you've also put in place, and how to identify compliance gaps, right? So these are things you also need to really really look into if you are going to be making use of enterprise retrieval engines, and there are quite a lot of them, right? And one of those engines I would say that Microsoft has developed and produced is what we call the Foundry IQ service, and we'll actually see that come into play when we are talking about this. Now, measurable impact built on Azure. So I think this comes in from the fact that, okay, you're making use of agentic retrieval engines. How do you want to measure the impact of this particular service on Azure? Now, there are criteria you can actually use to measure how impactful agentic retrieval engines are on your environment, right? Things like faster decision cycles. You can see here that it reduces time to insight from days to minutes with agent-driven synthesis. So when you are making use of agentic retrieval systems, you are able to get faster decision making processes, right? Less manual wrangling. Here you can see you eliminate repetitive research and data preparation across what disconnected tools. Why? Because your agents have access to the overall layer, right? And another one is consistent decision quality, standardized reasoning across teams, regions, and business units. Why? Because your agent is not just spitting out what is in the files or what has been stored on your storage account. No, it's reasoning and synthesizing the output from those documents based on the context of the prompts you are providing to it. And in another case, we have what? Lower operational risk. Of course, due to the fact that your agents are explainable, of course, governed AI reduces exposure and builds what? Stakeholder trust. All right. And then we are looking at here high level Azure aligned architecture, right? In all of this agentic retrieval engine process, you want to understand how is the flow, how does the flow come into play. So you can see here under this, the bigger circle, which you have the what? User and orchestration, right? You can see here the user and orchestration. So here you have your Copilot Teams Foundry multi-agent orchestration. And then in here, which is the core, you have your what? Core data and governance, which is your Synapse, your Fabric, Data Lake, and Purview. And in the middle, here is where you have your AI reasoning and retrieval, which is things like your Azure Open AI, vector search, enterprise connectors. So you see, it serves here as a middleman. Says here, each layer is independently scalable. See, it says here each layer is independently scalable and governed, enabling enterprises to what? Adopt incrementally while maintaining end-to-end security, auditability, and compliance from day one. Right? So in each of these circle parts, you can have scalable functions, which is very, very important. And of course, what is the use of agentic retrieval systems if there are no security measures in place? Zero. There's virtually almost zero use if you don't put security measures in place, right? And what are some of these security measures that have been put in place? One, identity and access, right? So, of course, before you can even access the services being provided, you need to first of all have a subscription in Azure. You need to be an authorized user, right? To be able to process or configure these applications. And that's where your Microsoft enforces RBAC. ensuring only the right agents access the right data. So agents cannot just go and access the files if you don't give them access to those files. That's one thing you need to understand. Then, of course, there's the tenant boundary, which is data never leaves the customer tenant. Zero cross tenant exposure, unless you want to do so, unless you want to remove that boundary. You also have safety guardrails such as built-in content filtering aligned with Microsoft responsible AI principles, and of course, full auditability, which is Foundry plus Purview deliver complete reasoning lineage and compliance what traceability, right? So, in building or making use of agentic retrieval engines, you need to ensure that you have these security measures in place. And then what's next? What's next? The future, autonomous decision intelligence. This is what we see as the future. Autonomous because they can do things on their own, right? And then we now have them being able to make what? Intelligent decisions. So in this scenario, you would have proactive surfacing agents can surface critical insights before users ask, right? Continuous learning, you have models evolve from what? Surprise interactions, or let's say from enterprise interactions, improving relevance and accuracy over time. Automation integration, right? You have deep connections with Power Automate and Logic apps turn into what? Insights, or turn insights into what? Orchestrated actions, right? And then, of course, from dashboard to intelligence, a fundamental shift. Enterprise move beyond static BI towards anticipatory decision systems, right? So these 4 points are where we see a shift happening in the future, right? Agentic retrieval systems are always continue to grow and they will always keep on growing. So I'm done with my slide, but I also want to show you an example of what an agentic retrieval system. So I will proceed now to share my screen. So maybe let me share my browser. Good. Okay, good. So one of the things I wanted to do today was I wanted to show you how we are working with this agentic retrieval systems. I'll bring this up here so you can see, and I would go to here, possibly go to portal.azure.com so you can see what is happening. So I was able to build a sample application, right? And like I said, this is a sample application that makes use of what agentic retrieval, and it's an example of what we call agentic retrieval agents, because in this particular application, you have that um, the system, right, or this application, it's able to retrieve answers from the document or file stored based on the agent's capability to reason. So you ask a question, and the agent don't just go look for a file and give you the content of the file. No, it reasons what is the question you're asking, and how can it retrieve what is related to those questions. Awesome. All right. So now let's see, how did we go about building this application so you have a better understanding on how the application works. For you to have a better understanding on how the application works, let's go into the resource group for this particular application. So here you can see here, this is It's a small, will I say a small application here that is hosted on this web app, but you can see all of the services I'm making use of to ensure that that application works fine. Now, first things you need to know is that in this for this application to work fine, I have a storage account. So you see this storage account ST67 this SRC. That's what you see here. ST67FC NIAY RSRC. Right now, this storage account hosts a couple of these files, right? It holds files regarding Northwind standard benefit details, Northwind health plans, financial market analysis, benefit options, pegs and plus, and then it also holds data about Zeva company and what employee handbook, right? So now all of these um, files are fed into Azure AI Search. So if you look in here, yes. So you can see this is the search service, right? And then if you look at the indexes, we have been able to create an index, right? So we in this for this particular system, we created an index, right? And this index is able to, it's like you know how the indexes work. You it chunks all of the data and put them into um, smaller bits that the system can be able to um, get the data out from, right? So these are the indexes, and of course, this is the indexer. The indexer, the way the indexer works is that it run when you run the indexer, it runs to populate the the indexes. So, for instance, what do I mean? If you run these indexers, right? Let's say, for instance, you have a system where new files are constantly going in, right? You can set your indexer and say, okay, this indexer, I want you to run every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes or daily. Why? Because you know the amount of files you are producing, right? So, if, for instance, this storage account is not just static, like you're always um, adding extra files to this account, then what you want to do is that you want to configure your indexer to run a couple of times. That way, the indexer will be able to update the index regularly, right? So that is one way you can actually go about that, right? So we have that now in play. Now, the next thing we also want to look at is what else? Yes, your Foundry IQ service. So in this case, what we've actually made use of is Open AI, and that's what you actually see here. So you see this, if you look at this name closely, COG 67 FC this is only but this service is an Open AI service, right? But the interesting thing about this in this project, if we go to this project now, if okay, let me say I go home so that you see it, right? So you can see here, you are able to see the Azure Open AI endpoint, the project endpoint and API key, right? So you can see that from this particular um, Open AI service, we were able to then connect it to what we're able to connect the Open AI services to this storage account through the indexes on AI search, right? So AI search, of course, is pulling those details from the storage account, and then the reasoning is happening through the AI Open AI. You see the open AI, you can see this. If you look at this here now, it will tell you the details about the agent in question. It also, here you can see the amount of requests that are being asked, the tokens being used, the input tokens, the output tokens. And if you look at it now, you can see that right now it shows that this service is currently running. Number of requests, you can see, right? It shows that this service is currently running. So now I can come here on this particular application and ask what is included in my not health or not wind health plus plan that is not in standard. So if you remember in the storage account, I told you that we have what um we have the Northwind health plan, right? I don't know if it's able to. Okay, it doesn't show you the content of the file until I download it. But the idea is this: I'm asking the agent. I've given the agent two different a question that compares the content of Northwind Health Plus benefits and Northwind standard benefit details. You can see in the question here what I've asked, and the question is this: what is included in the Northwind Health Plus plan that is not in standard? And then let me ask this question and see, look at, you can see it right now. If you look at this, this is the response from the agent. And if you remember when I made mention of the fact that the agent itself doesn't just go to the document and spit the content of the document back to you. No, it doesn't just do that. It synthesizes the response, meaning it reasons and try to give you a response in a way you would understand. And look at the question, the feedback gave was said the Northwind Health Plus plan includes coverage for specialty drugs, while Northwind Standard does not, right? And you can see that it does citations, right? Now, if you look at these citations, you are then able to see the content of the file. Look at this. You can see that this is the content of the file itself, and you can see how large the file is. But it doesn't bother itself with giving you all the content that don't matter, right? It doesn't bother itself with giving you all the content that don't matter. It only retrieves the part of the document that makes sense to the question you are asking. And that's why you see here, you can see that it has gone through 3 different files to be able to give you this analysis, right? It has gone through 3 different files to be able to give you this analysis. And let's just out of the blues, right? I'm thinking, let's ask the agent and see if it can actually give us these details in a tabular manner. So I'm going to say what is included in the Northwind Health Plus plan that is not in standard. Let the answers be in a tabular form. Let's see what happens. Let's see. You can see this now. Normally, right? Normally, the agent, because of how smart it is, right? Like I always tell you, it has the ability to understand the context of your question. Now, in the actual files, these differences do not necessarily have been compared side by side. Do you understand? These differences may not have been compared side by side, but because of this agent has a reasoning ability, it will then look at the content of file 1. What is file 1 saying as regarding your question? In our case, you can see that benefit options here. You can see it looks at benefit options, which we saw in this storage account. You can see benefit options. it takes the content of benefit options and tries to look at benefit options. What does benefit options contain that answers the questions you are asking, right? And then it takes the content of file A, compares it to the content of file B, and now I've already told it like, look, I want my answers in a tabular form, and then it creates a table and gives you back an output. I can for sure tell you that in the files themselves, this comparison wasn't done in a tabular form. But because you are dealing with an agent that is reasonable, it reasons, it's then able to compare these answers side by side. Right? So, this is one interesting thing about this. And it doesn't just deal with this, it also tells you, look, you see, it shows you the citation of the document. You can see it shows you the supporting content. So you see, these are the content it actually picked from the files before it starts to analyze them. And then it shows you its thought process. Look at this. Look at this. These are the thought process of how it is working. But then, even though it's thinking in this way, it will not just give you the answer in a way that doesn't make sense. Of course, imagine you're asking the application a question and it's bringing back code to you. Of course, you don't want it in a code form, but it understands that. So, therefore, it synthesizes it. Now, if you remember, I mentioned to you that the agent performing this reasoning is the GPT 4.1 mini, which we saw here. You can see this. So, the more we are actually um, carrying out context on this, the more this is um, the I would say the agent doing the reasoning for us. If I refresh this tab, let me see if it updates it. Can you see now? You can see what we have here. We have what 3.6k tokens, right? And then 3.19k with a output token of what 491. Right? Now let's ask some questions and let's see if this data remains the same. Let's ask some other questions. Of course, we can always ask some other questions by coming to the home screen. Like I mentioned, these were sample questions I prepared already. Now, I'll ask another question. I'll just say, what happens in a performance review? Wow. So you can see that now, although I'm talking about performance review, the agent goes to look at the storage account here. This is the storage account. Do we have anything on performance review here? Okay, no, but it has something called an employee handbook. Because if you look at the output, you see, it was able to get the answer from the employee handbook. Right? And it tells us in a performance review at Java conducted annually, your supervisor discusses your performance over the past year and provides feedback on areas for improvement. It is a two-way dialogue where you can discuss your goals and objectives for the upcoming year, right? The review aims to provide positive and constructive feedback to help you develop and grow in your role. Now, if you look at the actual file itself, right, you might not see the sentence in this way. But because you are dealing with an agent, the agent will then come, look at this is look, I can see here, it says this performance reviews are conducted annually and are an important part of your career development. Now, if you look at it here, did it repeat it the exact way you saw it on this file? No, it didn't. It reasons. You asked a question, what happens in a performance review? Although in the document, it states here that performance review are these and this, it will come here, it will refine and think, oh, what is the best way to simulate or to answer the question being asked And then after simulating and thinking about this, it now gives you an answer that makes sense to you. It then gives you an answer that makes sense to you. So agentic retrieval systems are honestly, they are doing a whole awesome job, a whole lot of awesome job. Because imagine in this day and time, you work in a system where you need to retrieve or you need to get answers from a whole lot of documents. How do you do the comparison? Do you understand what I'm saying? How do you do the comparison? Now, for you to be able to do the comparison, you need an agent that understands how this works. You need an agent that understands how this works and how to give you answers based on what you are providing to it. So this is um this is something really really interesting. Like this is something really really interesting that is going a long way. It's something really really interesting that is going a long way, and solutions are being built based on this. Solutions are being built based on this. And for you to understand how this works, you need to understand how agentic retrieval systems actually work. So I believe I've taken quite much of your time. Of course, you can always build systems like this or sample applications like this, and and understand how they work. If you have questions regarding this session, don't hesitate to ask them. Of course, you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Promise Uche Nwachku. I'm always available to answer your questions as much as I can. So please don't hesitate to do so. Um, yes, like I mentioned, um, we have interesting series topics coming up. So don't hesitate to follow us on our LinkedIn pages, subscribe to our YouTube channels, and don't hesitate also to follow us on Meetup, right? Those are very very important channels that we use to let you know what events we are planning, right? Those are very very important details we use to let you know what events we are planning. So this is something you really 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 want to look into. Awesome. At this point in time, I see that there are no questions for me. And like I mentioned, in case you do, don't hesitate to reach out to me. My LinkedIn page is what Promise Uche Unwachko, and I'm always willing to answer as many questions as I can. And yeah, I think we will stop here at this time. And I wish everyone an excellent Easter holiday and see you next time. Thank you all for taking some time to listen to this session, and I hope you learned one or two things. And of course, I see a message from Eddie in the name Current Eddie saying thank you for this. Yes, thank you so much, Eddie, as well for taking your time to listen to this session. I think that and I hope that I was able to pass one or two messages across to you and that it was really, really helpful to you. So, goodbye and see you next time. Thank you all. Bye bye.